Okay, let's get started. Thanks for coming, everybody. Really appreciate it. I know you guys probably have better things to do with your Thursday afternoons than listen to me talk. Um, so I see a lot of new names that I don't recognize in the chat. That's pretty cool. I see lots of familiar people as well. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Chris White. I'm a marketing manager for Planetar and iGUIDE, and I'm also an iGUIDE guru, which means I know a lot about iGUIDE related stuff. That's about it. I don't know much else, so that's why these webinars are perfect for me. I'm going to try to talk for about 30 minutes. I'm going to try to keep it short. I know I say this every time, but I'm going to try. And then after 30 minutes, I'm going to answer questions. So if you have questions, type them in the chat. The little speech bubble you see there, click it and type your questions in. And after about 30 minutes, I'll go through them all. And I will answer any questions you have. So good questions. I'm going to get you started. If you have in the past had anyone ever, question you about square footage and you didn't know how to handle it, so if I'm going to try to tell you how to handle it, but if I don't give you the answer you're looking for, that's a great type of question to put in the chat. Or if there's a term that I use, I'm going to try to define everything. But if I use a term and you don't know what it means, again, that's perfect for the chat. Just to say, hey, Chris, what were you talking about? I had no idea what you meant there. I will not be offended. Okay. And the last thing, please like, follow, and tag us on social media so that we can share your content. Because if you mention us on, for example, Facebook, we'll be notified, and then we can then share that content and give you a little boost there. Okay, cool. So the goal of this webinar should be quite fun and valuable for everyone who creates iGuides, because I'm going to try to give you a basic understanding of measurement. You're not necessarily going to be an expert. That takes time and research and to become comfortable, but I can at least get you started. And what I'm going to try to give you through this webinar is the ability to handle yourself when you're on a job site, when you're in the field. So I was a real estate photographer for years, and I shot iGuides, and I got a lot of questions about floor plans and square footage. So if you can answer those questions right there and then, it saves you just heaps of time versus saying something that maybe you're not comfortable with, or saying, oh, here, I'll look into that for you. Because anytime you say that, all of a sudden you've just given yourself a bunch of work that you got to do when you go home, because you have to remember, and then you have to make a phone call and maybe even contact Planetar or iGUIDE or the drafting team and then ask your question. So if you already know the answer, awesome. You can give it right there and then, and you can look totally professional, like you know what you're doing, which is quite cool. Because I have that background, as a photographer providing floor plans, I've gotten a lot of these questions. So I'll run you through a bunch of the ones that sort of come up, quite frequently for me. But I'm going to use my experience, my recent experience, to sort of explain why square footage is important right off the bat, because a lot of people who use the iGUIDE technology don't really take advantage of its greatest strength, in my opinion, which is measurement and floor plans. So the iGUIDE tour could be looked at like, or not the iGUIDE tour, but the iGUIDE technology could be looked at as technology that measures a property, and then sort of as a side effect, you get a virtual tour out of it. And a lot of other virtual tours are the reverse, a lot of other 3D tours, I should say. They are, the tour first, and then you can kind of turn that into measurements if you want. So iGUIDE's greatest strength, in my opinion, is floor plans and measurements and the confidence that comes from that. So if you're not using it, as something that you would, sell because it's a huge benefit, then that's a shame. So I'm going to try to give you the confidence anyway to do that and tell you why you might want to do that. So my wife and I, we just bought a new house. We sold our existing house and we bought a new house. And the reasons why square footage is important in something like a real estate transaction, which is what I'll be focusing on, is very apparent to me now because I just literally was using square footage information, every day for like, a month and a half or so. But the main reason why square footage information is important is that it's tied to the value of a house. I mean, you could debate this, but I think that there's a lot of factors that go into providing value for a home. Its location, its method of construction or materials, and square footage is just part of that. But it is tied to the value of the home. And it was very interesting when the agent that we were working with was selling her home. She was using the square footage, as an indicator of what the price should be, like right from the get-go. And that was oddly enough unfortunate, because she didn't have access to the iGUIDE yet. I hadn't made it yet. So she was using the local tax information, which is a terrible idea, which we'll get to later when I go over sort of sources of square footage information. But the reason that it was really important right from the get-go was that for me, it allows you to attach a value to home, but then it allows you to compare spaces. So if I'm, so for example, as a prospective buyer, it's important to me because I want to know that I'm not, for example, overpaying for a home. So I want to know that the square footage is in line with the price, but also that the house that I'm going to is similar or bigger, hopefully, than the house I'm coming from. So our house, the one we moved from, wasn't particularly big. So it was, really interesting to use those numbers in terms of square footage to figure out, like, is the new house bigger? It's hard to tell, right? So calculating the value or the sale price of a home is a very important reason to have square footage. But then comparing spaces one to another is another really great reason. And then the last one, again, from my perspective as a recent home seller and buyer, is space planning. So I want to know things. So that measurement information is critical for like most of the things I want to know. Will my couch fit in this corner if I put this table over here? Or will my bed fit here with two end tables on either side? There's a million scenarios you can come up with. But the reason that I found this really important, this space planning, is that we had not like a really long close, but like about a month and a half between selling and then getting into our new property. And it felt like an eternity, right? But I had nothing to do other than plan the space, so that so having the measurement information was really, really handy. It was really nice. And that was extremely valuable to me, so that I could plan, before I moved in, and plan the move itself, which was great. It was really cool. Okay, enough harping on square footage information. It's important. There's lots of other reasons why it's not, or why it is important to different industries like commercial real estate and facility management and so on. I can do a whole webinar just on that, but I need to move on because otherwise we're going to run out of time. So let's talk about the different types of area calculations. So I have loaded up a property here that happens to be on realtor.ca, but it makes it easy for me because the iGUIDE is embedded right in the listing page on realtor.ca, so that's pretty cool. And I'm going to go through the different types of areas. So you're going to get asked this more than anything else, I think. Someone can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but people want to know what you're giving them. You go out and you shoot an iGUIDE, and then you send them the data, and then they need to know what to do with it. So I'm going to tell you what the area calculations mean, so you can tell them what to do with it. So if you go to any iGUIDE, and then it'll by default be on the the 3D tour, and you click on the Details tab, and you scroll down, you're going to see all of the room dimensions and square footage totals. They're the same ones that you would see in the iGUIDE report, but the iGUIDE report is boring, so I thought I'd load this up instead for fun. So what you can see here is that you've got obvious room dimensions here, and then you've got area totals on the right. You can see floor area information here. There we go. And if you scroll down to the very bottom, you're going to see total above grade floor area. So there are two types, the two main types. We've got interior and exterior. Okay, there's one in the middle, it's excluded, but we'll get to that in a second. So interior and exterior. The difference, I wish I had a graphic. I actually had a slide, but I didn't have time to find it. But I might edit it in so it looks like I'm showing you the slide. We'll see if I have time to do that. But interior area is what you're measuring with the camera. So when you're creating your panos and your scans in every single space, you're measuring the interior walls, and the entire interior perimeter is calculated, and everything inside that perimeter is the interior area. Okay, so that's the space inside the walls, from the paint inward. And that is an extremely valuable number because that tells you in a real way what the kind of area you're working with when you're like, going to live in a home. That's an actual number that has value because you can look at it and it makes sense. But that's not the number, oddly enough, that most real estate professionals use to list. They use something called the exterior area. And that you can see that in this example kind of down here. This is probably pretty small here. Let me zoom in. There you go, that's better. Okay, so exterior area. So what's the difference? So the interior area is the inside of the property, from the paint inward. The exterior area is that from the paint inward plus the area occupied by the exterior walls themselves. So that would represent the entire footprint of the property. So that's bricks and siding and everything, as though you were to measure it from the outside, inward. But we don't measure from the outside in, we measure from the inside out because it's more accurate for many reasons. But the difference is just that. So interior area is space inside the property that one can, sort of live in for the most part. You could look at it like that, although it's not a perfect example. So the paint inward, and then the exterior area is the whole footprint of the property. So if someone asks you what they should be using to list, they can use either number to list, but they can use the exterior area as long as they know what they're talking about. So I'm going to give you an example of a mistake that an agent can make. And it's not your job to teach them this, they should know, but it's good to know that this is possible. So let's suppose that an agent takes this number, the exterior area, and lists with it on their local MLS. Okay, no problem. It's the exterior area, it's fine. But then they say in the listing, 1,451 square feet of beautiful living space. Well, that's not accurate because this isn't living space. This is exterior area. It's different. So living space is space you can live in. Exterior area is interior area plus the walls. You can't live in the walls. So, if someone asks you what they should use to list, you can tell them this, and then you can describe now what it is. It's the interior area of the property plus, all the walls and bricks and everything. So it doesn't include livable space entirely. It's mostly livable space, but then you've got some extra stuff there. You can clarify that for them. And you can actually see, if you look at each floor, you can see the interior area, and then there's actually a perimeter wall like length. So you can actually see the length of the perimeter wall, and then you can actually see the wall thickness, which we'll get to in a minute. And in order to get the exterior area, the interior area is multiplied by the wall thickness to get the perimeter wall length is multiplied by the wall thickness to get the exterior area. There you go. And even better, if you fumble over it and you can't remember what I just said, no big deal. There's this link here in every single iGUIDE that says method of measurement. And if you click it, it gives you an explanation of all the stuff that I just said in terms of interior area and exterior area, which is fantastic. So even if you're not sure, you can load up any iGUIDE you've done and you can get an explanation right here. So it's awesome. You can also refer people to this. So I do this all the time where I try and explain something and I mess it up. And I say, look, there's a link there. I'm probably not doing a great job explaining it. It's a bit confusing. So if you click the link and you read that, it'll do a better job. And it's all here, which is fantastic. So there's a few other areas that I'll just briefly touch on because they're not quite as important. There's excluded area, and that is exactly what it sounds like. It's area that's drawn, but that is excluded from the interior area. That's typically like garages and other things that don't count as like conditioned space. And then you've got also included area, although we don't really specify that anywhere. Included is the opposite. It just means things that are included. And then you've got one that I won't go into any great detail about, but you've got billable area. Now I load it up. There you go. So if you have a property that you've shot, the interior area and exterior area are not what you're being billed for. That's what's called the billable area. And you can find that by going to a property. So this is the same property you just saw listed here. Whoop, there we go. So it's this one, 15 Ridgewood. And if you go to find your property on the iGUIDE portal and you click on packages and add-ons, so you click the blue edit button, then you click packages and add-ons and you scroll down, you're going to see this. Hopefully you guys can see that. It says billable area. So the billable area is not the interior area and is not the exterior area, is its own thing. And that's because it usually includes the basement. They could be the same in theory. That's possible, but you're billed for what's drawn, not for the calculations that are done to create the exterior area, for example. So if you need to find this, again, click the blue edit button on the My iGuides page when you see your property, and then click packages and add-ons and scroll down, and it's right there. There is a knowledge base article about billable area. So if you want more information, you would go to support.youriguide.com and type in billable. Let's try that. Oh, you know what? Actually, I think it's linked at the bottom, wasn't it? Let me go look. Oh, it's right there. Okay, so never mind. If you want more information about billable area, just click the button at the bottom and it goes right to the support desk. Oh, that's fancy. Look at that. Okay, cool. So the other thing I wanted to show you, so we got the measurement area, or sorry, the method of measurement. Oh yeah, I'm going to show you a trick. This is really cool. So if you, if you click on the three little dots here, this is our fun fact for today. You can export all of the room dimensions that you see here as a CSV. I'm not 100% sure why you would want to use this outside of just having those room dimensions in a spreadsheet for your own records or something, but it's cool that it's there. That's kind of a hidden, interesting feature. That's pretty spiffy. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that I was going to talk about exterior wall thickness. So let's do that now. So I've loaded up an image here. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so the I get a lot of questions about exterior wall thickness. Why it's important, how do you get it? So here's an image. This is my wife's thumb, and this is our old house, which we just sold. So I'll have to take a new image, I guess, at my current house. My current one is made of, it has an exterior cladding of siding, so that actually would be a good one to do. And my current house has side lights, which are another issue, which we'll talk about in a second. But exterior wall thickness or perimeter wall thickness are really important because that's how we calculate that exterior area. And again, exterior area is the interior area, or rather the perimeter of the interior, multiplied by this thickness, this wall thickness, to calculate the total area occupied by the entire building. And this measurement is taken by you and entered on site, or you can enter it survey, or you can enter it later in Stitch. And it is in inches or centimeters. It doesn't matter which one. But the measurement is typically done with a tape measure or a ruler. It doesn't really matter. You can see here, this is just a plain old tape measure. And that number, when inputted, will be applied to the project usually. So when you're creating a project in survey, you put in the name. So, 123 Green Street. And then you would typically, because you're there, right at the front door, measure the thickness of the exterior wall, and then put that in under the project, and then tap create, and you're done. That's all you need to do. So the common question that I always get is, do you include any kind of trim? And the answer is no, of course not. You want to measure from the paint all the way to the outside of the exterior cladding. So if you look at my wife's thumb here, you can see her thumbnail's right at the edge of where the brick stops. And that's where you want to measure to, where the exterior cladding stops. So from the paint to the outside of the exterior cladding, whatever that is, stucco, siding, brick, doesn't matter. And another common question I get is, well, won't all the homes in my area be the same? And the answer is no, no, they're not. They're constructed differently. It depends on the era that they were constructed. So some houses are built with 2x4s. Some houses are built with 2x6s. Some houses have a larger gap between the sheathing, as in the wood sheathing, and the brick or the siding. Some have no gap, So house construction is not a very consistent thing, oddly enough. So you always should measure every single time. Now, another common question, and this comes up a lot, is, well, the front door, the thickness of the wall is, only 4 inches because there's like these little windows on either side, side lights. And my new house literally has this. So I'll take a new picture to show that. Um, so so we recommend that you use the front door because you have to walk through it to get into the house usually. So it's convenient. But if you can't use the front door, that's okay. You can use another opening that's more representative of the property. Be very careful not to use an opening like a door from the interior into the garage, because that doesn't have exterior cladding. So that's not representative of the perimeter of the home. So that don't use that. But in the worst case scenario, you can use any door you like. That's not the front door if it's better, or you can use a window. And oddly enough, you can actually include the wall thickness if you want per floor as well. So we recommend that you put it in for the whole property, at the front door or by measuring something on the first floor. But then if you want, you can get really specific and you can measure for each floor independently. And when you create a floor, you'll see there's a wall thickness option there for you to put it in. So if you don't put it in, it's fine, it's totally fine. The project wall thickness will be inherited to each floor. So let's suppose I put in 9 inches for the main project. All of the floors will have 9 inches as their wall thickness. And you can see that in Stitch. When you click on any floor, it'll say the wall thickness and it'll say 9 inches inherited. So it'll say that. But if you want to, you can enter it per floor. Should you enter it per floor? Honestly, it doesn't make a huge difference unless the property really dictates that. So for some weird reason, you've got a first floor that's maybe brick, and then the second floor is a completely different cladding, and you think there's a difference, well then yeah, sure, go ahead. There's nothing wrong with that. So wall thickness should be used on detached properties only. So completely detached. If a property is semi-detached, just don't include it. Don't include it for towns. Some link homes, I don't know if you guys have those where you are, but we have these things called link homes here where they're kind of sort of connected, but not really. Don't include it for condos, especially. Condos is a good example because they don't own their exterior walls. So that means the exterior area calculation doesn't really make sense. So don't provide it at all. And if you encounter a scenario where you have multiple claddings around the outside of a house, just pick one that's the most representative, or again, don't include it at all. So that's for a detached home. If you don't include the exterior area, it doesn't break anything. No one's going to get into any trouble. Okay, I can see questions popping in. That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm just going to get this one now since we're talking about wall thickness. If there's a thicker brick facade around only the bottom, yeah, so this happens. Would realtors typically use the biggest possible dimension? You could. I recommend that you pick one that's most representative. So let's suppose you've got a stone facade around the front door, but then the whole rest of the house is brick. Well, like you use an opening with the brick. It doesn't make sense to over-report the square footage, right? By using the stone, around the front door. And the next question, what about vinyl siding? Exactly the same. So vinyl siding, no difference. You measure from the inside, from the paint, to the outside of the vinyl siding itself. You're going to get occasionally you're going to get strange things with regards to wall thickness, and they just are what they are. So I'll give you a couple examples. Some houses just have really thin walls. Maybe they're old, maybe they have no insulation. I have no idea. So if you get a wall thickness that's like 5 inches, I mean that's unlikely, but you never know. You're going to get an error in Stitch. You're going to get a few different errors. And Stitch is designed, the software Stitch is designed to keep you out of trouble. So it requires that you basically confirm or enter the wall thickness if you haven't put it, and then, or it'll warn you rather, and then it'll give you a little summary of the wall thicknesses at the end. It will also throw an error message at you if the wall thickness is too small. And the reason for that is that people often make little mistakes. You've gone and you shot 5 houses in a day, and then you accidentally report the wrong square footage, or sorry, not square footage, wall thickness. And then you basically have underreported the square footage. If you put the number in and it's too small, and you might not notice. So the Stitch tries to warn you. What about decorative glass door inserts? Yeah, so side lights, right. So those aren't representative of the walls, so don't use them. Find a window and use that instead. partially below grade homes often have concrete block with stone above and are built with bricks and sticks. Actually, oh, I forgot to mention grade. Okay, so the exterior area calculation does not include anything below grade. So you probably, most of you, or all of you have noticed that Stitch requires you to choose a grade level when you export. If you don't do it, it'll make you do it. You can't ignore it. So the reason that you have to choose a grade level is that the exterior area calculation by default does not include a basement or below grade floors. So because that's how most people list. However, you can override that if you want to. That's technically possible by doing one of two things. One, you could just mark a floor as above grade if it's below, then it will be reported. It's probably not a good idea. It's better to mark it as below grade if it actually is. And then in the portal, you can go to the actual iGUIDE itself, click the blue edit button and scroll down a bit, and you're going to see an option to include below grade in the total exterior area. So typically not included, but you can add it if you want to. All right, how are we doing for time? Are we all right here? Oh, 30 minutes. Okay, so I'm already going to go over. That's fine. Let's just let's just push through, I guess. All right, now I loaded up some floor plans. Where'd they go? Oh, no, I didn't load them up here. Okay, so let's talk about floor plans really quickly. So this comes up a lot. Room dimensions, okay? They're a little bit confusing because rooms aren't perfectly rectangular or square most of the time. Sometimes they're weird. So the room dimensions might not make sense when you actually do the multiplication that you see here, and then you look at the square footage total. So I'm going to tell you what to do. And this can come up. An agent might look at your room dimensions and say, well, how did you get that number? So I'm going to show you. Every iGUIDE has access to floor plans. Actually, on realtor.ca, you can scroll down and there's a special button for floor plans, which is pretty cool. So if I click it, it loads up our floor plans. So these floor plans look very pretty. They're very attractive. But the attractiveness of the floor plans is a direct result of them being encoded with extra information in here. So I don't know if I can zoom in. Hold on. Can I? Yeah, there we go. Cool. Okay, so if you look at a room on the floor plans, there's these little arrows that, you know, kind of go around that each wall. So that is a representation of the sort of place from which the room dimensions are measured. So you can see this master bedroom is 1310 by 12.7, right? So the width, the 1310 comes from this measurement, you know, and how you measure room dimensions is from the longest point to or from the longest width to the longest length, you know. So that doesn't necessarily make sense intuitively because there may be square footage missing for something like a closet or a hallway or who knows, right? So if someone asks you what the room or how did you get those room dimensions, you can literally load up the floor plan on the fly and say, here you go, there's where the room dimensions came from. It was measured from this side of the room, from that, you know, corner to over here on this side. And that often clarifies things because if you see, you know, a 10 by 8 room and then the square footage is not, it's like 75 square feet, that math doesn't add up. So that can be quite frustrating for people sometimes when they see that. The other thing that's quite cool is that all of these colors here, they mean stuff. They're not just there for fun to look pretty. So you can see that some areas are sort of bluish. So, and these are just decorative colors. They're not, you know, there for any specific reason. They're just there to look nice. But you can see that sort of blue and like a bluey green for the kitchen. And then the living room is like a tan. And then the master bedroom is like a beigey type color. But the important thing here is to see the garage. So you see how the garage is white? The same as the background. Anything that's shaded is included in the square footage totals. And anything that is not shaded is not included in the square footage totals. So if you want to know what's included and what's not, you can instantly look at the floor plan and you can see what's included. So, and this we're going to talk about this in about 5 seconds. Often when you have an issue with regards to square footage, you know, you're talking with someone and they say, hey, I thought it was 3,200, but you're saying it's 3,100. The first question you should ask is, well, where did you get that information? But also, what's included in that total that you just gave me? So in this scenario where you have an iGUIDE, easy, that's what's included. Whatever's shaded is what should be included. Oh yeah, so someone mentioned the foyer. Kitchen looks blank. The advanced settings need to be enabled. Oh, I see. Yeah. Foyer, some areas are kind of a gray. They're sort of ugly and they're sort of hard to see. Stairs as well, but they are included. What was I saying? Oh, right. Okay. So a few other things just to note. All the windows and doors, they're not just willy-nilly chucked in there. They're accurately placed. So this is important because you are basically required to collect this information. So a very common question I get all the time is, how many panos do I really need, in a space? Well, you need one, to measure it, to get like sort of like the walls, right? And you need that same pano ideally to also show the space, visually so people can see it on the tour. But then you also need that pano to show the windows accurately so that the draftspeople can draw them in. And if you look here, you can also see there's a fireplace in the corner. They need to be able to see that. So there's a lot of extra data in here in terms of doors and windows that the drafters need to see. So if they can't accurately place a door, that's a problem. That's going to be challenging for them. So sometimes you need some extra panoramas just to show, where windows start and stop and doors as well. All right, cool. A few other interesting things here. You're going to notice that on this floor plan, it says exterior area above grade. That's fantastic because a lot of other floor plans will just say, total area. And they don't specify above or below grade. They just give you the whole total for the property. So, that might come out to be double this if they're including the basement. So that can be very confusing for people. Also, floor plans, every iGUIDE has a compass. This is another fun fact. Whenever you're shooting, the compass and the camera is taking readings, and all those readings are averaged to create this compass and add it in. There is also a scale bar in the bottom left-hand corner of, of every iGUIDE. That means you can take this floor plan and you can bring it into other pieces of software, and you can use that scale bar to set a proper scale. I don't think you have to if you're using DXFs, but I'm not aware of anyone at the moment who's really using the AutoCAD format of the iGUIDE floor plans to really do anything. All right, another question from Jason. What about a closet that is full of clothes or jackets? Do they need to be removed to get a proper measurement? It's an excellent question. Okay, I'm going to use this as an example. So I'm going to use my drawing tools. There we go. So I'm just going to circle this closet. I hope you guys can see this. So you can see this closet here. Let's pretend that this closet is full of clothes, just absolutely jam-packed with 100 coats. You got fur coats, you got your polyester coats, you got your down parkas, everything's in there. So you're going to open these doors and you're going to think to yourself, well, I'm not going to measure that. So the answer is you don't really need to. So if you look, all of the spaces around this closet can be measured. So what that means is that if you measure them all, you've measured the closet because there will be a hole that's exactly the shape of that closet. So interior closets are very safe because there's a, in terms of total square footage, well, if you've measured everything around it, you've essentially measured it. The reason you open the doors and you shoot a pano anyway is so that the drafters can properly identify that as a closet. And so they can label it for you. So that's just, for your own convenience there. The interesting thing about closets is that often the worst case scenario for a closet is that, you've got what would be, I don't know, like a bunch of coats and like a bunch of shirts and things in there. You think, oh, there's no way I'm going to get measurements here. Often all you need to do is just put your hands in and then just, separate the shirts a little bit. The drafters need a very small amount of information to draw that back wall. So if you can get them just enough, that's all you really need. In terms of closet measurement, the worst case scenario, and this has only happened to me on hundreds and hundreds of shoots, like a couple times, is that a closet is so full that you have to ask someone to move stuff. And if that happens, it happens. You just have to deal with it. And that's going to be most commonly on a sort of a perimeter closet or even a room itself, just like a storage room, where the homeowner's been told to dump everything and just chuck it all in there. And when you get there, you're like, well, I need to measure this space. So you have to tell them, say, look, I need you to move this stuff. Because otherwise I can't measure the space and you can't get your floor plans. Within a closet, there can be plumbing stacks, so they won't see that. Yeah, there can be all sorts of wacky stuff in closets that's, even more important now because of COVID than before. So because people can't come to the house often, or they can't spend as much time in the house, often they're using all that extra data and they're sharing it, like give it to the home inspector so he can sort of figure things out, or what do we call it, mortgage appraiser as well. So, even if a dirty, gross closet with a plumbing stack, for example, doesn't have a lot of value in marketing sense, it still has value just for a property documentation scenario. Okay, that's a lot. Let's really quickly move on to the most important thing that we're going to talk about, which is sort of what to do with regards to measurement discrepancies. So what's going to happen? If you haven't had this happen already, it will. Is you're going to be on site and you're going to shoot an iGUIDE, and right there or later, you're going to have someone call you and say, hey, look, you gave me the iGUIDE and it says 1,500 square feet, but I'm pretty sure it's 3,200 square feet. And then you're going to get stuck because you're going to say, hold on, let me check. So in order to avoid that awkward scenario, I'm going to give you some tools that I use that are very effective. They're not tricks. They're just literally things that you should do. So this is good information. If you need tricks like, do whatever you would normally do, throw a smoke bomb or kick a table over or something and just run. But you don't need to do that because I'm going to tell you how to handle the situation. The first thing that you need to know really when you're dealing with square footage information, this is critical, is that no two people will measure a property and get the same number. And so that's like a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, but it's just the truth. So there are a lot of different tools. They all have a different margin of error. And there's a lot of different ways to total up square footage. So if you send 5 people out to measure a property, you will literally get 5 different numbers. The odds of them being the same are astronomically high. It's not going to happen. So that means that if your number doesn't match the number that they have, that's normal. That's totally normal. It shouldn't match. In fact, if it did match, that would be super weird. So that's a good thing. The problem really there is that sometimes a person who's listing a property, or anybody who has an idea of a number in mind, will have already invested a certain amount of mental, juggling into that number. And so they don't really want to replan. So I'll give you an example. You have an agent, they've looked up the tax records and it's 1,500 square feet. And now you come in and you tell them it's 1,400. So they've already based the price of the house on 1,500. So they're not happy about this, but they should never have done that to begin with. So if you can tell them what's happened and they can deal with it, then the next time they order an iGUIDE, they'll wait for the proper square footage before they determine a value, or they'll make an estimate based on the tax information and then they'll firm it up after with the actual number. So there are a few different sources of information you need to be on the lookout for. I just mentioned one. It's tax records. So you talk to an agent or someone and they say, oh, well, the tax records say it's 1,700 square feet. So tax assessment square footage varies wildly depending on the area that you're in. And it is often, I'm not going to say completely inaccurate, but it doesn't take into account a lot of the actual information in a home. So it's typically measured from the outside approximately. Again, it was never meant to be used for listing a property. In most cases, it's meant to be used for determining taxes. Sorry, I haven't changed the visuals. I don't really have visuals for this part. Basically, I just got off vacation, so the slides are going to look a little terrible. I'll probably just edit some fancy ones in and pretend like I showed them to you. Either way, just listen to what I'm saying because there's nothing really to see for this part. The tax records, though, are meant to determine, taxes basically you pay on a home. They're not meant for determining the actual size of a property, which I know sounds weird, but it is what it is. But I'll give you a really good example to tell you why they're inaccurate. So let's suppose that you have a 2-story home and there's a large area that is open to below. You've got like a 2-story living room. There's no way someone determining square footage from the outside of a property can know that. So that means they're going to include more square footage than is actually there. And there are a zillion different little tiny examples of things that they don't know about because they're just guessing. So tax assessments are really just guesses done from the exterior of a home. So they're not accurate in any way. An even trickier one is builders' floor plans. So that's going to come up a lot. So, you create an iGUIDE, it says 1,500 square feet, and they say, well, the builder's floor plans, they say it's 1,700 square feet. Okay, so I'll tell you how to deal with that. Builders' floor plans are a recipe for a home. They were made before the home was even built. So that means that they, don't really represent the actual physical property. A lot of things can change when a home is built. And in order to use builders' floor plans, you have to have them verified by a third party anyway. And that third party is you. It's the person creating the iGUIDE. So builders' floor plans often don't have to follow the same rules regarding square footage and creating room dimensions. So they're quite frequently not accurate. And the last type of measurement would be that you're going to have to deal with is that someone measured it themselves. So this one can be tricky because some people really like measuring out a property and they take great pride in their work. And if you tell them numbers that don't match what they've created, often they can get very fussy about it. So there are a lot of different ways to measure a property, and I'm going to tell you a few different ways to deal with these discrepancies. So number one, ask for the data. So if anyone comes up to you with any of these sources, it doesn't even matter where the source is from. My Uncle Gary said it was 3,000 square feet. Okay, sure. Always ask the same question. Can I see the data? Do you have the information for me? Can I see it? Like 9 times out of 10, there's no information to see. So that's great. Often what will happen is that you will have someone question your information and say, hey, can you go check your numbers? So don't say yes, never say yes. Say, hey, I need something to compare it to. I need to see your data. So you have to turn it around on them. Say, I need to see your information, because most of the time they don't have it. So what I'm trying to do is save you a bunch of time. So if you say, oh yeah, I'll check into those numbers, and you contact the drafting department and then they go, yep, that's what they are. You just wasted a bunch of time. So don't even bother. Just say to the agent, look, supposing it's an agent, just say, I need to see your information so I can compare it. Can you send me your data? Most of the time they won't, because there isn't any, and you don't have to worry about it. Occasionally they're going to send you something like a builder's plan. No problem. Easy. You can look at the builder's plan. You can say, oh, that's a builder's plan. Yeah, they're more of a recipe for a house. Those don't actually represent the property. I did an iGUIDE. This is actually what it is. Or if they say it's from the tax assessment, you can say, oh, yeah, no, you can't use the tax data accurately because they measure from the outside. It's, it's not, they don't accurately calculate all the different interior spaces. So that's an easy one. Now, where it gets a little more tricky is when they ask you to change it, because this will happen. I had a fellow once, I was shooting a house and he brought the builder's plans over and he's like, hey, Chris, I already listed the property at 3,200 square feet. So I'm going to need you to make your floor plan say 3,200 square feet. I was like, well, I'm not doing that. So I don't know what to tell you, buddy. And you're going to have people do that. They're going to try to bully you and they're going to say, look, this is what it should be. You need to change your numbers, and you have to stand your ground and say no. And no one really wants to hear that, but it is what it is. This adds value and credibility to your product if you do this. So if you take this high road, it's for the best long term. I mean, you've got to be nice about it, obviously, right? So the reason they're asking that is that they've often they've listed with that number in mind already, and so they don't want to know a different number because then that's awkward for them. So there are some situations that you can't get around where you may have to turn the room dimensions and the square footage off. That is the low road, and you can totally do that. That's fine. But if you do that, that means that the iGUIDE is significantly less valuable, because now all of a sudden, instead of providing all these measurements that are really high quality, you're just providing a virtual tour and some decorative floor plans. And that's a shame. So, I would recommend that you attempt to engage with square footage and understand it. Now, hopefully, I'll be able to dig out some links for some sources of sort of square footage information. And then maybe I'll post them on the forum or something along with the video. The last thing, how much time do we have? 2:46. Okay, the last thing I want to show you guys real quick is advanced measurement. So this has just come up a bunch of times. Oh, I forgot about this. Okay, 2 things I'm going to show you. The first one is accuracy. So you're going to get this question a lot. How accurate is your system? Okay, so that is a very complicated thing to ask. It sounds super simple, but nobody really understands what this means. So let's suppose you say, oh, it's accurate to within 1%. Okay, often people go, oh, okay, cool, and they just move on. Like they have no idea what that means. They just want an answer. If you really want to give them a real answer, this is where you find it. Okay, it's right here. And it's unfortunately, it's complicated. So, but it is what it is. So if you really want to engage with it, it's right here on the main page, the main Go iGUIDE page. You got to scroll down. Hold on, scroll down for you here to this little section right here. And you can see that on a floor plan, it's 0.5% or better. And the corresponding uncertainty in square footage is closer to 1% or better. But it's a linear measurement on a floor plan, which is weird. But that's the actual answer. So if you get asked about the system's accuracy, you can either send people here or you can attempt to answer it yourself. But the accuracy itself has a lot more to do with what's obviously being included or excluded than anything else. So often just knowing what is included in the square footage totals is more important. So if you can communicate that to people, you're good to go. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to show you is, let's see, the advanced measurements. So it's been coming up a lot lately about ceiling heights. So if you engage advanced measurements, does this have it? Yeah, it does. Good. Okay. And you want to check ceiling heights, you can do that with advanced measurements. So I'm just going to show you how that's done since it's come up so many times. So in case you don't know, advanced measurements is an add-on that you can include. I believe it's included in premium iGuides, but if you want, you can add it on to a standard iGuide. And it does this. If you click on the measurement tool down here, it gives you a few extra options. So in case you don't know, every iGuide includes a measurement tool, and it has measure mode 1. So every iGuide, standard or premium. And this is probably the coolest thing about an iGuide in a general sense. When we show the iGuide at trade shows, this always gets people really interested because they can see the utility of it. It's really handy. Measure mode 1, I'll just show you how it works, allows you to click and drag and measure anything on the floor plan. So I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm going to zoom in here. So if you look at my cursor on the floor plan, I'm in the kitchen. I'm going to click and drag and measure the distance from one point to another along the exterior wall. There you go, 10 feet, 10 inches. So this is extremely valuable when someone is in that space planning sort of phase. You know, they're curious about the space. They want to see if their stuff fits in it. This is perfect for that. But if you want to get fancier, what you can do is you can click on the number button here, and you can go to measure mode 2 or 3. So I'm going to show you measure mode 2. And measure mode 2 allows you to basically draw a wall in. So that's probably hard to see, but I just clicked and dragged along the exterior wall here. And then it allows me to measure ceiling heights by clicking points. So the ceiling height here is, oh, I did it slightly wrong, but it's close to 9 feet. So there's a lot of information in terms of measurement that's built literally right into the 3D tour that you can get. You know, so that there's an enormous amount of value there in terms of sort of looking at a space, understanding a space. I mean, there's lots of different reasons why people would want to get square footage totals and measurement that have nothing to do with real estate. I'll just give you a few, like planning renovations, HVAC, heating and cooling calculations, interior decorating, all sorts of wacky stuff. Okay, so now is your chance to ask questions. Ask any questions you like. We've got a few minutes left. Does the camera have to be at the same height for the whole property in order for the advanced measurements to work? The answer is no. So the camera doesn't have to be at the same height, but per space, the camera needs to be at the same height in order for the advanced measurements to work. So let's suppose you've got, I don't know, well, perfect. We'll use this as an example. You've got a big living room and you have a kitchen. If all the panos are at the same height, yes, advanced measurement will work. If you have 1 or 2 panos that are at a different heights, then it won't work. So ideally what you'd want to do is you'd want to keep them all at the same height. But if you change the height between, say, a living room and a kitchen, and then you have a different height in a pantry, well, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Also, that won't affect, to the best of my knowledge, measure mode 2. Doesn't make any difference. Only measure mode 3, which is using triangulation. So you can change the camera height all you like, but most of the time it's moot because you're not going to be changing the camera height to any great degree anyway. Keep it at the same height, around about elbow height most of the time. Make your life easy, and only raise it or lower it if you really need to. So if you're in a kitchen and you want to raise the camera up to have a nice perspective down on the faucet, perfect, or if you need to lower the camera to catch like a railing, you're probably going to turn that one off anyway. I'm finding some houses have low lighting, so I get shadows of the camera in the shot. So lighting is going to be a thing. You're going to have camera shadows pop up from time to time. It's really common. My suggestion would be just don't worry about it. It just is what it is. There's no real way to avoid it in most cases, especially if you've got highly directional lighting. And if it really, really bugs you, like it looks really heinous, or more appropriately, if a client doesn't like it, they complain, you could, technically speaking, go into the images after and you could Photoshop it out. So that should be very rare. You shouldn't really ever need to do that. But if it comes up, it can totally be done. Can you provide 3D floor plans? Sort of. So if you use the floor planner export, like we don't provide them, but you can technically, I'll go to that page too, take any iGUIDE and you can export it to floor planner. And then from those floor plans, you can render 3D floor plans. 3D floor plans are really fun and really cool, but they miss a lot of the information that you would find like above the floor. So the above floor information is things like cove ceilings, sloped ceilings, arched doorways, anything that's like, not part of a floor plan won't really be translated. So in some cases, 3D floor plans look amazing. In other cases, they don't really make sense. So the last house that I came from had sloped ceilings on the 3rd floor. And so I would have to go manually input those, which, it's fine, but it's a lot of extra work. And then the floor plans don't really make sense until you do that. What's measure mode 3 for? So measure mode 3, just go back, is similar to measure mode 2. It allows you to measure points in 3D space, but it works a little differently. So here, we'll go back to this great room here, and I'm going to measure the same 2 points, or try to anyway, in 2 different panoramas. So that was the first one. And here is the second one. So 9 foot 1 inch. That's pretty good. So I've measured this detail in 2 different panoramas. And what it does is it uses triangulation to figure out what the height is. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So I'm going to finish up. I think we're doing really well here by saying thank you. I've recorded this. It's going to go on to our website in the webinar section. If you have questions, always go to the iGUIDE knowledge base and look first. The iGUIDE knowledge base has all the information you could ever possibly dream of, and then some. So in the event that you don't find something there, that's when you would create a floor plan. I see the question, SketchUp. I don't know. I don't know how SketchUp works. Possibly. You can't export directly to it. We don't have that ability yet. But I assume that SketchUp can take a floor plan file, like a PDF or a JPEG, and that you could draw it yourself if you wanted to. Sorry. Oh, last thing. Also, again, I'm going to reiterate, please like and follow us on Facebook. And we will share your stuff if you mention us. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. It was a pleasure. And have a great weekend. Cheers.